speaking of mystical experiences, I know in the work we're going to do together, we're going to have a live webinar. We're going to also have a course, and you're passionate about the Ayurveda, that you speak about that we could, and you just said it, train ourselves to being open to mystical experiences in a higher consciousness. And in a way, I feel like I know what
Mhm.
you mean with a higher consciousness. But then again, I was like, what is actually a higher consciousness? And is that really something you can train, or is that a result of how many lives
Mm.
you've actually had? Because I know this is a long question, but you came in, you must have kind of come in with a higher consciousness, since you already had an openness
Mhm.
to communicate with angels.
Mhm.
So I would love for you to address a little bit about what a higher consciousness is in the human experience, and sort of how it's possible to train that through the perhaps the Ayurvedic
Mhm.
way.
Mhm. Great question. This is one of those times where there's so much that I want to say, though. I wish I could just telepathically give it to everyone. It's like,
Understood.
okay, it's like it was just so much. I love that question. Um,
Please use words.
right. I'll do that, and I won't do interpretive dance answers either. Don't worry. Um, so higher consciousness, I think, is understood to be different to a lot of people, right? Because we all do come in with different levels of consciousness. That is true. That one of the things that I do in my when I'm working in the eighth chakra is I look at people's capacity, because we all do come in with a certain capacity that is ordained from our soul for this life experience. Okay, so most souls have a lot more experience than we might assign or assume when we look at certain people, let's say. Today is filled, this world is filled these days with people where we're probably questioning, like, where is their integrity? What were they thinking? Oh my gosh, like they're really asleep here. Or, right, like the humanness in us might really want to judge certain things. There's a lot of opportunity to do that these days. And from my experience, they have come in with a certain level of consciousness because that is their role. Their soul itself could have a lot of capacity because they too are eternal, just like we are. But if their soul is said, hey, we need you to be closed minded, we need you to really deal with honesty, we need you to work this out because, A, that's part of how the divine wants to experience itself through you. And so this is something you've come in to explore, to give feedback to the totality and the greater whole of everything. And in doing that, you're going to push others into more of their journey and their teaching and their learning. One of the things of higher consciousness is never forgetting that everything is in place and everything and everyone serves a purpose. So our again, if you are even watching a Wisdom from North interview, any of the interviews, and you're connected to this kind of conversation, there is a really good chance that the majority of you is already geared towards that higher consciousness, which is why people like us feel the need and this deep desire to keep seeking, because we can feel the inherent expansiveness and continuum, not just a continuum like time, which is more of that horizontal. We feel the expansiveness going up on that verticality. There is always higher up and higher up and higher up. And so we are led and guided to keep going in that direction. And so as we continue to increase our understanding and our capacity to have a higher and higher perspective, um, in many regards, that is how we come in as a soul to do our work. And so in this lifetime, in our eighth chakra, it very well usually says like your capacity for spiritual growth or spiritual expansion is very high, because we need you to contribute to this tipping point of the greater collective consciousness as it's growing and evolving and expanding and experiencing new dimensions of itself, which I think is part of why there is so much what feels like polarity right now. There's so much that feels like extreme opposites on both ends of the spectrum, if you will. Is because we're working on the spectrum that goes like this, but as we're going like this from dark to light, from right, wrong, good, bad, heavy, light, all of those things, we're also doing in equal amounts going up and going down. So that's why there's also density. A lot of us are tuned in to a lot of the dense, dark energy that is very alive in our world today, and it has put a lot of people in motion and served as a catalyst to help them keep rising up. So one of the things that Ayurveda talks about, or the Vedic teachings talks about, is that nature and the consciousness, just the greater consciousness, is always seeking harmony. So we're not going to have all of that density and darkness without having equal parts of lightness and lightness. We're not going to have, we're not ever really going to have more light than we have dark. Not right now. That's not in terms of where we are in the Vedic calendar. There's something called the yugas, and which just is another name for an age. We are coming out of the Kali Yuga, the Iron Age, and that is very dense, and that is when we are furthest away from this lighted consciousness. But there were those of us as souls that were seeded in from what's called the Sat Yuga, which is the golden age, or Sat means truth. And so it is the age of truth. And many of us, again, most likely you would be watching a video like this or any of the number of incredible interviews on this channel, because you are one of those souls that have been seeded in from this thing called the Sat Yuga, this golden age, so that the collective doesn't forget, and we get to keep weaving our light into the tapestry and into the fabric of this greater cycle that will ultimately take us back to another age of truth. So, many of you would be familiar with Atlantis and the story of Atlantis. So Atlantis, in its highest day, was an exact example of what the yogis call the Sat Yuga. It's where people were energetically sensitive, people were telepathic, there was reciprocity, there was bartering, there was people were not starving. It was very much like the Garden of Eden. And then it started to fall because it went into another yuga. And so for many people do identify with feeling like they have been on Atlantis. That is very likely. And that is why you are here again today, because you are coming from this place called the Sat Yuga, this age where we have to be. And so this idea of consciousness will says that there is always something higher and greater. There's always something lower and darker. There's always something on all sides of these different spectrums. But because nature is always seeking harmony and always seeking balance, the more that we have the light, hold the light right now, the more we are going to feel that anchoring in of the dark, because that's just where we are in the greater cycle.
Wow, profound answer. So, in a way, it's a bit of a paradox that's a great big soul
Mhm.
with a lot of experience, to say it like that, comes in this incarnation with a lower consciousness in order to help others raise
Yes.
their consciousness and humanity. Because it seems like now we're in this ascension process, we're about to raise our consciousness.
Mhm.
So, but in a way, we are already
Yes.
higher beings. There's a lot of paradoxes here.
And I always say the divine is in the paradox. So I love that
Mm,
you're saying that. The divine is always in the paradox. And
mm,
in my opinion.
mm,
So when we stumble upon paradox, or we stumble upon something that this is true and this is true, if they are both simultaneously true, there is something very divine about that, because that is where we see the seemingly duality showing up together.
mm.
And that's where the divine is.
That's true. To watch the full video, click the link below, and I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel.
Ina, letho, resto maliata falia, tan shavra leto.